All right, welcome back to the show this week, where we have a guest that has been highly recommended as one of the best leaders in Southwest Missouri. Our guest today is one David Cameron. He's been the city administrator at Republic since 2016. Spent a lot of time in Arkansas, I know before that. And Logan Aguirre, when she was asked, give me some people that I just got to have a conversation with, David Cameron, your name was one of the first to come out of her mouth. So I'm excited that we can, do a deep dive on leadership. I love leadership. I know you love leadership. So I'm excited to have this conversation today.
Yeah, glad to be here.
Well, I appreciate you. I really do. I want to start with a true story from one of my coaches who, Coach Baldwin. He actually told me that today that you actually had to use your 50th birthday to slide up to a different colored tee box to be able to beat him. Is there any truth to that?
Yeah, he's a little salty. If you don't know DB, he can be a little salty on certain things, and he's a little competitive. So yeah, whenever I moved up a few tees, and we're still playing for a few dollars, he might be belly aching about how far I can still outdrive him.
Well, he thought that was funny, and I thought it was funny, but that's the perks of us older men, man. We got to take advantage of everything we can. And I will vouch for DB is extremely competitive, not kind of competitive. He's extremely competitive.
Yeah.
But that works out really well for Nixa football, I can assure you.
Yeah.
When I say leadership, what would be your definition of leadership?
Visionary. Uh, not afraid to be the person that's going to take the bullets for the rest of the organization.
That's fantastic. What are, with some of the best leaders that you've been around, in your profession, just in your life, whether it be mentors, people you've worked with, what have you, what do you find are some common qualities or common behavior skills that some of the best leaders possess?
Well, one is they're decisive. Two, they're constantly learning and asking other people for advice. They're not afraid to say, I don't know.
Mm.
So I found the ones that will stand up in the moment of adversity and take the hit versus throwing somebody else under the bus. Watching what other leaders have done wrong probably helped me understand what good leaders look like. Because sometimes, a lot of times, you'll do self-preservation. The ones that'll do their job versus trying to keep their job.
Mm.
You can always tell what that looks like because they're taking risks and they're calculated. But they're always asking other people. They're seeking out other coaches, seeking out wisdom, and they just don't claim to know it all. And the other thing that I would tell you about that coach is I think they're authentic. And so the ones that can really, really sell who they are, their character first, then their competency really, I mean, I think that's when your troops begin to follow you because they see you're a real person with real scars and real hurts yourself. And you've seen victory and defeat.
I love that. And, I have said many times on here, two of the qualities that I find most appealing in leaders. You said one of them already, and that was authentic. They are truly who they are all the time. When the bullets are flying, when the bullets are not flying, in front of the camera, not in front of the camera, they are who they are. And the other one is, and you may have in a roundabout way talked about this, but being able to be vulnerable, being able to share with your people, not just the highs, but the lows, somebody that they can 100% relate to and they trust them. Trust is a huge issue, in leadership. The reverse of that question would be, in 2025, what do you think are some of the obstacles that leaders have the most issues overcoming or getting around? Like what's causing, a lot of issues in today's business world, just in general, from a leadership standpoint?
Without a doubt, without question, it's conflict resolution.
Mm.
People having honest conversations with one another. We want to tell everybody great job. We don't want to tell them. We don't want to coach them. We're afraid that they're going to quit, they're going to leave us, or we become close to them and we don't want to have that constructive criticism. So we don't really tell them the truth. We do performance reviews and things like that that say, hey, you're a fantastic individual, but we never really tell them, hey, these are the areas for you to advance. And what happens is when you get into conflict, they've heard all this great, and this is the first time they've ever heard difficult. And what I've seen mostly is we're not willing to confront what is not working in the organization. We want to celebrate what is, which you should. But what I see holds up organizations a lot of time in leadership, they just don't want to deal with what we call the workarounds, the areas in the organization where you're working around somebody because you're afraid of who they know, what they might be able to influence, or maybe they're a great performer, but their attitude's not right. So you're almost afraid to confront it because, so we in here where it's like, we don't do workarounds. I will not work around somebody. We need to deal with the situation. And so when I do coaching now, or even working with other organizations, I'll find sometimes that you're working around the individual. You need to actually, in a loving and constructive way, you need to confront it and not worry about what they may or may not do as a result. And I think that's holding a lot of places back because we need workers so badly. We're almost afraid, like, but what if they leave and go somewhere else? We what if it to death that we don't even make a decision. So that's the biggest issue. We're not decisive enough to deal with conflict in the workplace.
Okay, I absolutely love that. And, one of the biggest issues around conflict is it's uncomfortable, right? So
Yes.
the choice, and it is a choice to be more comfortable, is probably one of the leading charges behind why that's such an issue. Give me, in your life particular, because I would assume that early on in your career or throughout your career, you have had issues with conflict resolution, like how and when did you decide, make a decision that I'm not going to work around, I'm not going to keep from having the tough conversation because it is hard. Anybody that has ever let somebody go or it is hard. There's nothing, there's nothing fun about that, but in your career, how has conflict resolution changed from the beginning, to the end, like, is it something that you have gotten better at intentionally?
Yeah, it's something, it's just like everything else. You have to learn. That's a learned skill because
Mhm.
being naturally mean to somebody or difficult or disciplined, we love Christmas for a reason, right? We give presents. There's not a holiday of the year where we give discipline out. So there's not a lot of classes in college that teach us that either. So uh, naturally, it's an uncomfortable position because you're affecting someone's livelihood potentially in those conversations. You also want to make sure that it's not your personal uh, behavior that day. Maybe you're having a bad day. Don't let your emotions get involved. But because early on in my career, I got put into a position I didn't even know what leadership was. It was an individual sport. It was kind of like I was an individual. I was excelling. I was performing, and got put into a position of more people under my control. But if they weren't performing at the level I was, and they didn't put in the work that I did, so I started saying, "Wait a minute. Now I'm being held accountable for their performance because it could impact mine." And I went about it very wrong, very young. I was like, if either you put in the work that I put in, or don't work here. Well, that's not going to keep people around very long.
Sure.
And really, when it really changed was when a guy from when I was in Northwest Arkansas taught me about the balance between processes and relationships, and that processes are about the law. It's about doing things, the rules, the play, execution, doing it to the nines. Relationships is about, hey, how are you doing after 5 o'clock? How's your family? What's affecting your ability to perform? Maybe there's more to it. And sometimes we can be so nice to people that that's all we care about. We give them all the, hey, how's your family? But we don't hold them responsible for their performance. Or you can be so hard driven, which is the way I was early on, that performance is all that matters. What happens to you after 5 does not. Once I began to realize that there are human people, you have to deal with them individually, but you need to sit down and have a conversation. And sometimes that's just asking, how are you? And I want to say it goes back, Coach, to 2000. I'm going to say it was around 2003 when I had a real wake up call that I needed to change my leadership style because I was very driven on the bottom line and the result. But it wasn't because that's who I truly, genuinely was as a believer, as someone that, like, I believe in people. But when you got to report to the boss, and in coaching, it's wins and losses, baby. I mean, you got to deliver the goods, or they start looking for somebody else. Well, it's no way different in work. But when you're only trying to win the result, but you're not trying to win and love your people, once I started to learn to love and care about them both in discipline and in encouragement, that's when I began to realize, wow, there's power in doing both versus just because I held people accountable, yes, but I was almost not almost at a fault letting other behaviors go. So some of my workarounds were because I'm like, I don't want to be a bad guy. And once I learned that, I'm going to say 2003, that's whenever all of a sudden my world began to evolve and I began to advance into administration of government, just being further than being a department head.
I think the relational piece is huge in leadership, because you can drive somebody till they break, right? That's easy to do. But when somebody knows you love them and care about them, you can drive them and you can't hardly make them break, So I have found, the relationship piece and much the same story as you, I can remember being very process oriented, not caring about too much the individual, being very transactional. I coach, you play, let's win, but there was a point in time when, some things happened in life where it kind of changed, it kind of, there was a point in time when my daughter got really sick, and then all of a sudden football was not the most important thing in my life, and it was kind of, it was weird because up until then it just had been. I didn't know no better. But when I learned to, start caring about the individual, like truly caring about what these kids turn out to be, like how can I influence them, like the football part kind of took off, it was really crazy how the importance of the relationships drove the
Yeah.
football part. And it's kind of, I mean, if you don't know, you don't know, and you would not think that's the way it is. And you can win. I've had coaches that were very transactional and very successful, and I would argue they may have trouble sustaining that over a long period of
Yeah.
time, because that can be a challenge. One of the things I think there are very, I think there are similarities in business and in coaching. I've often said I think Nick Saban could go run any business in the world and be totally fine, So I do have this thought, when you go into, the city of Republic and you take over the city administrator job. I've been asked this, 100 times at Nixa, when you take over, how do you change the culture of, a school, a place, a team, a city, so I would ask you first, how do you define culture? That's a little bit of a buzzword and I get that, but, how would you define culture? And then, take me through that process, whether it is what you did, when you went into Republic, or let's just hypothetically say you left and went into, another city. How do you go about changing the culture of a place?
Yeah, so we'll start with culture. What I would say, your definition of it for me is it is the reflection of the leader. So basically, what is my culture? What are my values? What is it? Because attitude reflects leadership. Remember the Titans? I'm sure you love it. One of my favorite lines in that movie is where the transition takes place in that movie is, when Julius Campbell is talking to Gary Bertier and he says, you got the worst attitude I've ever seen. And he says, well, attitude reflects leadership. So I think the culture is a reflection of the leader and the values that they've brought in to lead that. That's one. So then what you have to do is what I talk about if I go anywhere is I talk about the 5 laws of disruptive leadership to disrupt the culture. So one is you have to set expectations. So it's like I raised 3 adult children. I said, hey, the expectation is you be home at 11:30 on weekends. And this is what happens if you are, this is what happens if you don't, and kind of just you set expectations inside the organization. And so in Republic or anywhere else I would go, I'd say there's 3 things you have to fundamentally focus on. 1 is process, 2 is your relationships, and 3 is building trust. And there's a book out there by David Horsager that was pivotal for me called The Trust Edge. And in that book, he says people trust the clear and distrust the ambiguous or overly complex. So I had to make it really simple in Republic. Like either you're improving the way we run the play or the process, make it easier for the community, make it simple. Like government can be so bureaucratic that it's like, I'm not sure where to get my water turned on and where to go get my tax. So we make it so difficult to get something done. Then 2, build relationships. Just remember, the Bible's pretty clear, he's without sin, let him cast the first stone. I mean, we all struggle. We're human. And so have a little compassion for one another, not everything, but you got to have a balance between the 2. And then 3 is trust. Then second, I say is once you've established what those expectations are, you build your team and your culture around, hey, these are no exception, no exceptions to these rules. So in Republic, we talk about urgency, decisiveness, go the extra mile, challenge status quo. And there's two sides to every story. Be sure to listen to both sides before you create judgment, and remove obstacles, don't create them. And so what we did is we built a team around it, then wrote the expectations and job descriptions, performance reviews each year when we were evaluating on what processes have you improved, what relationships are you building internally and externally. Are you one of those people that likes to stir up gossip and distress inside? So we were beginning to just evaluate it. But one, it was set expectations. Two, build a team. Three, you create alignment. So basically in government, you have mayors, elected officials, you have the city administrator, and using the coaching expression, you would have the coach, you would have coordinators, players. You have to have alignment. If the players are running the organization, not the coaches, so the alignment had to be established. And then four is you challenge status quo. I want you to challenge everything, specifically the term, why are we doing something? Well, that's the way we've always done it. Well, has anyone ever challenged the why we do it? What is your why? And challenge it. Somebody says, why are we having to do something? And then the last one, my favorite one, is to be bold, be courageous. Do not let fear dictate your direction. I always tell people, I'm not talking common sense fear. If someone's pointing a gun, I would tell you to run. But at the same time, in an organization, we're like, but what if we get in trouble? What if this makes a parent mad? Or what if this makes the community upset that we're making this decision? You've got to make decisions based upon doing your job, not keeping it. And so when I'm moving into a new organization, a new community, they've brought me in. My livelihood's at stake on that. I'm not going to worry about what everybody else thinks I should run it the way they want it to, because I've been asked to come in and run this organization as a leader, as a visionary, based upon my convictions and my values. I didn't relocate back from Arkansas here just so someone could tell me how to rearrange the furniture in my own house and then tell me how to live in it. So you kind of got to set the tone and the culture and then back it up with the results and do the little things right and the big things, the fundamentals right, and the big things happen. And that's how I'd go about any organization, whether I'm coaching that organization or Republic or any other community for that matter.
Wow. Yeah, we could spend, I'm gonna say you could spend probably a half a day talking on, right, the 5 laws of disruptive leadership, which is fantastic. It's something I've said for years, when I talk about leadership, 3 things that I find are extremely important, and you laid out all 3. 2 of them was in your first example, set expectations. 2 of them are, build relationships, develop relationships, and build trust. Those 2 things got to happen, like non-negotiable. And I also think number 3 for me on my list of non-negotiables is achieve results. Like I have to develop relationships, and I have to build trust with everybody in it, all the stakeholders. But then at some point in time, you got to win, right?
Yes.
You got to win, because you can be the greatest, I think, leader in the world. You can be trustworthy and you can be all that out the wazoo. But if that scoreboard don't go your way, they're probably going to be looking for another coach. You know what I'm saying? So achieving results does matter. And I know you ran into this when you took over, whether it was in Arkansas or, at Republic. This is the way we've always done it. Okay.
Yep.
That is one of the worst phrases that I just can't stand, this is the way we've always done it. How nuts did that drive you early on? Because when you go in somewhere, they're going to be more than happy to share the way that they did it. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like you said, there's a reason why you're there. You know what I mean? Like if everything was perfect, you probably wouldn't be there. So, talk about that statement just for a minute and how you got the people in the organization to get past that.
Yeah, well, I think that one is setting expectations is you set the expectation is when I ask you a question, if the first thing that comes to your mind to answer me with, that's the way we've always done it, you might want to rethink before it comes out your mouth, because what I'm going to say is what you're doing is creating an excuse to save yourself. I'm okay if you tell me, David, I don't know why we've done it that way. But let me tell you something. I know what you're asking me to do because you've written it in the expectations. You've already told me you will not accept that's the way we've always done it. You kind of take away that stool immediately early, say, please do not come to my office and say, but that's the way we've always done it. Because our organization says we're either going to be about process improvement. So if I ask you why we're doing it and it's not working, like, you know what? Let's change it. You're encouraged, you're empowered to change it. So what I did to answer your question is when I saw people challenging the way they'd always done it and coming up with new ideas, it's almost like they were approaching you like a whoop dog, like, I'm afraid to actually ask you for this. Well, what we would do is we're not allowed in government, as you know, we don't give bonuses, but we gave incentives of ways of improvement in their work, in their performance reviews. We just began to highlight each area, and each year at the end of the year, we had this like meeting, and we would celebrate specific individuals based upon where they had challenged status quo and how those new processes didn't come from me, they came from within the team. So the team created the culture we're in today, where I help set the culture or the tone, and that it's okay to change. It's okay to call an audible. It's okay to bring it to me. I expect you in the field of play to make a decision on my behalf. You can see what I can't see from where you're at. Change the play. Please, for the love of God, change the play. Don't let me run it right. I mean, do not let me get caught. Then we rewarded it. I mean, even if it was just a small victory, we over celebrated it, made it a big deal. And what people were seeing is like, wait a minute, they're making a little more money. They're being recognized for challenging it. Where others were like, I don't want to say anything. I just want to leave it the way it is. They watched other people get ahead based upon sticking their neck out just a little bit and taking a little bit of risk and presenting themselves. And so when people saw other people being rewarded in that capacity, they saw that it was safe to take risk. And a lot of the new ideas came from within the organization, but a lot of them were challenging. That's the way we've always done it.
I think that's a great sign of really, really positive leadership too, is when people in the organization can be free to ask and challenge anything without fear of you making them feel like an idiot. You know what I mean? Because there are people, that may not be as high up on the leadership development scale, that if they hear something that's less than, they, will make the other person feel less than. And, a great example for me is I have, one of our coaches is a good friend of mine, Chance Potts. Chance Potts has been in the business world for a long time, and I was able to talk him into coming out and helping us as coaching the running backs, because he has a ton of value to add to humans just in general, right? Like, and so he comes in, he gets on board, and there will be times early on, not so much lately, but there would be times we would sit in there on Sunday and he would ask questions, whatever pops in his head, he would ask. And sometimes it would be some of the most silly things from someone who's been coaching for 25 years, and he had been coaching youth league with his kids coming up. But I absolutely loved it, because every once in a while there would be a question that some might find silly that I absolutely thought was crazy good, because it's something I never thought about. Like, I'd never thought about that, like, and to me, like, I want others to throw it out there, right? And then be thick enough skin, okay, that if we don't go with your decision, it's okay. You know what I'm saying? Like, don't get mad about it, I've had that happen too, right? Somebody throw out an idea and you're like, man, that's a great idea. We're gonna keep doing it this way, but and then they get upset about that. That's not, that's probably not a positive quality as well. What are, in your estimation, what are some of the fears that hold people back, just in general, fears that keep them from, being the very best leader they can be, or fears that keep them from, standing up and doing better for an organization? Like, what are some of the fears that run people's lives? Because it's probably one of the biggest, in my estimation, one of the biggest deterrents, that hold people back is the fear of, what would you say, the fear of what?
Losing it all. Because you get into those places, as leaders of your home, you've made an income, you've got a car payment, a house payment, you got children, they got to go to college, one of them's going to get married, and you start going through the progression. And you get into that place where you're providing, and what you get trapped in, I've watched it a lot, is you got to sustain that, and you hit the pressure of it. So you begin to make compromise in your leadership or whatever that may be to make sure. That's why I keep saying most will do what they got to do to keep the job versus doing it because they're afraid if they do the job, it may cost them. Because in leadership, you're going to make decisions that are going to make people mad. And they're like, and sometimes those people that you upset are people of influence that can come around you. And you're like, but that person could really wreck my life. I mean, they have a lot of control. You know, it's like in your world like mine. I mean, a transition means I don't get to just pack up and move across town. I got to go to another community, and that I got to transition houses. I got to find a new place. My kids got to change schools. And so what we do in life, if you don't have an anchor or a place where you can go in your own faith or life, but you're anchored to, you can start to get really worried about what's going to happen to me. And so you start living in the fear of this. You ruminate what's going to happen long term, and we get way outside of today and the gifts of today and what we can do with today that we're living so far in the future. We lose sight of the gift of what we have now. And I watch a lot of leaders, and I've been, Coach, I would be lying if I said I've never lived that way, where I'm like, man, gosh. And, leaders lay awake at night going, this one's going to sting a little bit. And this one's not going to look good on the news. And we can look tough as nails, but I'm telling you, as a guy that's been successful, I've had a lot of sleepless nights too, going, man, God, how am I going to take care of my family if this goes bad? And they can just rip the rug out from underneath you. And so I think that leaders get a little bit careful not to lose. What fear of losing everything would be mine. It's like, this could all fall apart and it's on me. And how, that's heavy. And when it comes to family and taking care of your kids, man, don't get in daddy's way or mama's way. It can get ugly. And, but I also think it motivates us, Coach. Fear can also be a great thing of a great motivator to fight hard. Say, I'm not going to lose no matter what. But I think fear of losing everything, Coach.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, the Bible uses fear in a very positive way. I mean, it preaches, the benefit of fear to a certain extent. Talk me through some of that, when, you have a big decision to make, you're not sure how it's going to turn out, and you do have those sleepless nights where, I mean, we know the negative thoughts, the negative voice. We have a negative bias in general, right? Our brains do. Where do you find comfort? How do you, sleep when you have decisions like that? Like, where do you find that at?
Yeah, well, it's no secret I lean on my faith. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart. Lean on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he'll direct your path. But probably it's going to be in Philippians, be anxious about nothing, but in prayer and supplication, make your requests known to God. And I have to really, really do that a lot because I'm like, and then there's another verse that talks about the Lord will fight for you. You need only be still. There's times when critics will come, and if you do your job right, and you're going to call that play that is not going to be, it's setting you up for the next play, but everybody sees it as, why would you do that? Like, it's setting us up for the next one because you see the whole field. And you're going to take a hit, but you're willing to take the hit for what's in the best interest. And sometimes you got to realize that you got a big God in your corner that goes before you to fight. And sometimes that's easy to say on a podcast, but it's another thing to live it when you're laying in bed and you got to say, you know what? The sun's going to get up tomorrow. I'm going to rise up tomorrow, and it's going to be okay. And boy, there's something reassuring when you have that behind you, because most of what I'd say almost 90% of what I've ever feared, maybe 95%, has never come to fruition, or it wasn't that big of a bite after all. And I'm still standing and I'm still fighting. It's what makes me stronger every day to say, you know what? And my fears get less and less, but after a big loss or something, it's easy to put on a smile. It's another thing though, just to say, there's going to be some rough days, but it's the sun's going to come up tomorrow.
Yeah, that's easier said than done sometimes. I have a faith in God, and I believe that, he's got my back, and it's his playbook. I'm playing the game, right? But it sometimes can be so hard, right? When things come snowballing, when things don't go well, when you go for two in the win and you don't get it, like sometimes it can take a little bit of time before, you can get back to that thought of, God's got a plan and this is going to be okay, but it is hard. I got a funny story. This made me think about that. Several years ago, we're playing our big rival in Mississippi, and we come down at the end of the ball game. It's one of the biggest rivals in the state, man. It's packed, and we score at the end of the game, cut it to 21-20. And I'm just one of those guys that's going to go for two every time. Like it doesn't, I'm just, whatever. We go for two. And that's a whole nother discussion, okay? What do you run? Your best play or your best 2 point? Anyway, so we go for two and we don't get it. I'm telling you, like, I thought we had it. Like I had actually jumped, and then I was like, oh crap, and so we didn't get it. Tough loss, man. It was, playoffs and really tough loss. So the following Saturday night, I have a little catfish joint that I go to all the time. It's my spot. I could actually call the guy, he'd fix it, bring it out to the truck. Man, it's just awesome. So I call him, he fixes it, and I get there to pick it up, and he's not there. I'm like, oh my God, he's what? Where you at? Like he's not there. So I got to go in and get in line. So I put my hood up, and I go in there and I get in line, and the guy in front of me eventually turns around and he says, hey man, anybody ever told you kind of look like Coach Perry? I said, I've gotten that from time to time. He said, well, it's a good thing you ain't, because that's an idiot right there, man. Like, had he kicked the PAT and went to overtime, they'd have won the game. And I didn't say a word. I just was like, yes, sir. Yes, sir. I heard that happen. And I went on about my business. But that night, it was, like it was a kick in the butt, man. Like, because you do, okay, just like you've made decisions that you second guess. You just do, like that's part of anybody that's in a position that makes decisions. You are going to have that happen. And I have found, sometimes the whole conversation back to sometimes it's hard, when things don't go your way, because you have a lot riding on it and you care a lot, like you care a lot about what you're doing. So, nobody puts more pressure on the leader than the leader, and that's a lot of truth to that. Tell me this, and I'm just curious, I don't know, like when you go into Republic, one of the things we did here that I think, and your first answer, leadership is vision casting. Like it's being able to cast a vision for the future, so, when I came in, one of the first things we did was, we talked about what's the vision of the program, what's our why, what's our mission statement, what are our core values that we're going to hang our hat on, you know what I'm saying? And we're going to kind of make dang sure that we get this part of it right. When you go in there, do you have a process like that? Do you have core values that you put in place that you follow, or, a vision or a mission or anything like that?
Yeah. So basically, this went back to 2006 when I wrote one for myself. And I'm like, it's about being, when I say being honest, but we set it around, again, took the acronym of Republic. So we were going to be regional. So I'm big about not just being about Republic, but a rising tide lifts all ships. So I went in and said, listen, we're going to be a regional player. We're going to support Nixa, Ozark, Springfield, Stratford, Willard. We're not going to leave anyone out in our discussions and the overall strategy for the region from an economic perspective. We're going to be ethical. So anything we do, if we stub our toe and we make a mistake, we're going to announce it. We're going to be transparent. P, we're going to be professional. U, we're going to be urgent. B, we're going to be bold. L, we're going to be leaders. I, we're going to be insightful. And C, we're going to be caring. So I just made something very simple that an employee could remember. And what does caring mean? Caring means there's two sides to every story. It's not all about you. Leaders means you're going to stand up and be it. Urgent, it speaks for itself. We're going to be decisive. Be bold. Fear will not dictate our direction, leaders and insightful, we're going to remove obstacles, not create them. So we just created some real, like, what do I expect? Because in government, Coach, we like to create rules and make it difficult that people just don't understand.
Right.
So what my thing was, we're going to make it easier. We're going to get rid of a lot of those rules. But like I said, on the front end, when you set the expectations and you put it right there, it's repeatable. And Coach, the other thing that I did is I actually had my staff take tests. So if you were going to get promoted in Republic, I would take out I would take it. It would say mission. And our mission was we'll be aggressively progressive and process relationships and trust. Our mission state, our mission was that. Our vision was doing the right thing at the right time for the right reason. And here's our values. And we just took Republic. And I just left a blank sheet of paper. I said, if you can get the first 3 words of the mission right, the vision right, but if you're going to get promoted in this organization, you need to, as a leader, you need to demonstrate that when you go to be a leader for me, that you're going to represent to the people you're in charge of now. A lot of it was about setting expectation. Casting vision is one thing, but executing that vision, if you're not repeating it every 30 days, I've heard people forget it. So you got to constantly be reminding what is our core reason for what we're doing this for. And it's about 3 little words: process improvement, relationship building, and trust. And we call it the fundamentals of what we do. And from there, the victories do come. The victories have come. A lot of people look at our results and say, wow, what is this massive play that you call that generated? I'm like, we did the fundamentals of taking care of the team, casting vision, setting expectations, building alignment, creating team and culture, and the rest just took care of itself.
That's fantastic. We had you would not know this probably, but if you look at our helmet, there is a decal that sits right on the dead top of it. Kind of our DMGB decal. But to get that decal, you got to pass the test. And the test is, what is our vision, what is our mission, and what are our core values? And I think it's important that our kids know that, because they're going to go home and they're going to tell their parents and they're going to tell the people in the community. I think it is important. And I come across that just through reading. Like, I love reading. I picked up reading years ago. And when I started reading about companies that were really good, whether it be the Chick-fil-A's of the world or Apple, or they all had a vision, right? They all had a common mission. They all had, whether it was core values or principles or whatever, so then it made me start thinking, how I need to implement this, in our program. And it was the same time that, I would say the transformation piece started, and it kind of revolved around, having core values, having things that you can kind of hang your hat on, that, this is what we're going to be like. What does the role as a city administrator, what's the role of, how important is the school system or the school district in a city?
Oh, it's incredibly, first person I met with when I came to Republic, I asked the mayor, I said, I want to meet with the school superintendent. Very first meeting I asked for. And the reason why is because, number one, obviously, we're both utilizing taxpayer money to fund those resources. So we're both asking the community to trust us with their money to fund those programs and be great stewards over them. So what type of leader is stewarding over the public education system? One, and making sure that you're on the same page, because in our environment, in government as well, we're creating housing markets and opportunities for additional housing. Well, housing means more students. More students means more classroom space, more needs for programming, more needs for, I even say on the healthcare side, the education side, but the education piece is paramount, because schools, just like it is government, it takes a long time to build a school. So if you see that there's an influx of students coming in, you don't just go out there and put one up in a year. But also the other thing, Coach, to that question is, a lot of people that are moving into your community are wanting to know, what are the school systems like? So a robust school system with a great education system, teachers, coaches, parents, and everything, and network, even support for some of that just special needs, and that there's a care for that, and it's a culture of community, is huge, because they're wanting their kids to grow up in a safe environment in the school, knowing that there are good principles in place and things that are taking place. So it's very important to have a strong school system, because otherwise government can invest a lot of money in infrastructure, water, sewer, streets, and build and expect to build new businesses. But if the school system can't, number one, is not conducive for that, employers will not look at those areas to come to. So it's important to be on the same page with the school district. And there's obviously with sports, as you well know, there's community pride and spirit that goes with that. And that makes up community. So having a strong athletic program, band programs, it's fun to watch all of it and what they can do in a community, and how the community gets around those things. It builds community spirit and camaraderie together. And that's how communities can grow too, because people want to be a part of somewhere where they can live, work, and play in safety.
Yeah, for sure. That is, that's a very true statement. It's one of the things I've enjoyed most about this move to Nixa, Missouri is watching the community come together. Like watching them come together on a Friday night. I don't think there's another activity that involves so many different people, with it be, the cheer, the dance, the band, the ROTC. Like you got all these different, organizations that come together. And, when the city comes out, like that has been quite a pleasure to watch, and it just, like you said, it makes you feel good about the community that you live in. You know what I mean? Like, ain't nobody moving into no city that's got a terrible school district that, loses every game they ever play. Like, you're probably not going to find a booming business world, in a town with a terrible school district. What about your leadership journey? I'm guessing you didn't pop out the womb a leader. Okay. Like, how did that take place? When did it become really important for you to take ownership of, you need to become the best leader that you can be? And what are some things you've done along the way to, ensure that that's happened?
Yeah, that's a great question. So my leadership journey literally started whenever I was about 9. My dad left when I was little. We were left with one income. I didn't know the difference. I just knew that mama was crying and about how to pay the bills. And so I started pushing a mower, mowing a couple lawns a week, and I learned responsibility. And I learned a good habit and a dangerous habit, that money, working on a book that said money stop the tears. And but sometimes that'll drive you thinking it's an unhealthy drive too, because you're thinking that, hey, this will always take care of the problem. Right there, I learned the value that someone needs to step up and make a decision. But then when my stepdad came along, he told me the value of education. I didn't put a lot of work in my education. I was mowing, working, trying to make money. And he put the value when I was in junior high to go back and really put some effort into education. And so, but I started a little mowing business whenever he came along, and when I was 12 and 13, and we hauled a couple riding lawnmowers around town, and he helped me. I learned to do a little entrepreneurial work and how to be responsible for paying for my own vehicle, paying my own insurance. So leadership from that perspective started young. But really, it wasn't until I went to college, got just a technical degree. I went to water school, so I went to just treat water. I wasn't going to. My parents gave me 2 options. It's either go to the military, and they's like, with your mouth, you're not going to make it very long. I'm not a good follower. I'm pretty. I love to lead. I love to call the play. Too much maybe, but probably right there was really when it took off. Was when I went to college. I got a degree in just not organizational management, but environmental science, treated water. And I just began to just kind of move up the ranks. And I always my stepdad taught me, David, don't ever get beat over a piece of paper. So he said, get first aid, CPR, CDL license, get any piece of paper you can put a little symbol behind your name. And it started, Coach, with a little water license in Missouri that I had a statewide license, which I still have to this day. I'll never let them go. But it started with just one little piece of paper. And I just began to, I'm going to keep educating myself. He said, don't ever get beat over a piece of paper. And but he always used to say to me, stop shooting at the covey and pick you out a quail. And so just picking one thing that you could keep working on to improve versus trying to take on 7 different things was probably what propelled it. But just constantly trying to improve myself and not cutting others down to be seen. Let my own work speak for itself. I'll tell you that if you got to get to the top, or if I'm getting to the top by saying, hey, I'm better than so-and-so, I did it by demonstration, not by my words. And it just opened the door. But there came a moment in 2000, I'm going to say around 2001, that I'd hit a lid. In Maxwell's book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of Leadership, the first law is the law of the lid. And I'd hit that lid where my leadership was capped because of my education was capped on how to deal with organizational management. And from there is when I went back to college and got another degree in organizational management. And I'm not saying that education, I'm blending my work ethic and my desire to be a leader with education at the same time. And really, it began to really take off. And then I sought out mentors that were like, David, I have just the heart. I was always hear you got the heart of a leader. You care about people, but I just didn't have the education that the tools that really could blend with my character. And once those two came together, it was like a powder keg for me. It just took off.
Wow. That brings another characteristic or behavior trait that I feel like is really hard. And me and Chance Potts have discussed this on numerous occasions, and you have a little bit of it. What's your thoughts around self-awareness? I think it's a hard trait. I think it's, but you had enough self-awareness to know that you had a lid and you did something about it. Like what are your thoughts around self-awareness in general, as far as yourself and then what you see in other people?
Yeah, so now you tapped into a really good question. So I'll tell you what self awareness has done for me. So every Thursday, 2 o'clock, except today, I'm with you. Every Thursday, I go to a counselor and I work on self awareness. I work with somebody myself because I realize that I'm limited by my own mental capacity because the mind drives the body, and my mind can take me into places that are very unhealthy. And so owning that my mind is a very dangerous place. And that's why reading and renewing your mind in the word, I read Proverbs every day, and I'm still subject to wander. I'm still subject to look in the mirror and say, man, you're your own worst enemy. And you can talk so negatively to yourself. So self-awareness and what story are you telling yourself? If you're going to journal something, I challenge anybody that's listening to this, write a story. What's the story you're telling yourself today? Am I going to win the day or am I losing the day? So I've had days where I say, man, I've got it all figured out. Go into a counseling session and go, you don't know, come here from Sikkim, big boy. And you get your legs handed to you. And you're going, and I walk out there going, you know what? I'm stronger because I'm more self-aware of where I'm weak. And I'll tell you something, what I've learned, coaches, I'm running to my weaknesses more than my strengths. I'm like, I want to know what's causing me to be afraid of something. What is the root cause of that? And let's fix that instead of, I want to build on my strengths, but I want to attack what scares me the most. That's it.
That's one of the best answers that I've had on here ever. This will be episode 100 and probably 80 something about self-awareness, because I believe, as the numbers, if you Google it, 90% of people claim to be self-aware. Probably more like 10% of people actually are self-aware. And the fact that you know that you're not and that you are doing something about it puts you so far ahead of the curve, because Chance tries to tell me that I am self-aware, and I try to tell him that I know I'm not. Like, I know I'm not. Like, I know that I'm biased in my head toward me, and I don't want to be like that. So in my world, I've tried to increase the number of truth tellers in my life, like people that will actually tell me the truth. Because look, and you'll have this same problem. Like, when things are going good, you don't really get anybody to tell you what you're not doing good. You get plenty of people telling you what's good, right? Like the pats on the back. And I will, a lot of times when I go speak to a group or something, I will take a human with me that's a truth teller. And I want them when they leave. I'm like, look, I don't care what you say about what went good. I want to know what I can do better. Like, how did I mess it up? Like, what did I, and I get some great feedback because they know that's what I expect, and I did it here recently with Logan Aguirre. I spoke at a 417 event, and having shared that story, when I asked her for feedback, she was more than freely giving it to me, and my first thought was, man, that hurts. You know what I'm saying? Like, I was sitting there thinking like I was great, and I wasn't all that great. And, so it is hard, but, like knowing your limitation and knowing that you don't know everything is a huge, I think, check mark in favor of a leader. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that's one of the best answers that I've heard on here. One of the things that in the mental performance world that I suggest people to do for self-awareness is, at the end of the day, like, I'll keep a gratitude journal in the morning where it's the way I start my, I'm going to get up like you, and I'm going to, read out of the Bible app. I'm going to read a book. I'm going to keep a gratitude journal, things that went good today. or things that I'm grateful for. And then at the end of the night, and I'm not great at this, but this is one that I want to get better at, is to keep a well, better, how journal. Write down 3 things that went well. Write down 2 things that could have went better, and write down 1 thing that you learned on the day. So, if I have a bad encounter with my kid, if I sit down at the end of the day and I actually sit down and write, all right, these 3 things went well. This interaction didn't go great. How could this interaction be better? Like, I'm becoming more self-aware instead of, just running this hamster wheel, right? Doing the same thing over and over and over and over. So I think it is a tool for self-awareness, but I've not run across a whole lot of tools that are better. Your tool's better. Go see somebody would be a better tool probably than, journaling to yourself. But I do think, and I'm sure this, I mean, putting your thoughts on paper, is big. Like, there's something to, you keeping a journal for yourself about things that, you're grateful for, or things that didn't go great. How could I change this? How could I handle this better? Because hindsight's 2020. Heck, we're all a lot better after we've, thought about it for a while, but then it gives us the opportunity to learn from our mistakes that we do make, and we're going to make them every day, right? Like, nobody's perfect. We're all going to screw crap up. What is your definition as you sit there? What's your definition of success?
Yeah, I think my definition of success for David Cameron is I'm the most authentic David Cameron I can be. I'm who I am, not what I'm not. Because sometimes we can put on so many masks to cover up what it is. Success is, are you living the life that you were fearfully and wonderfully created to live versus living somebody else's?
Mm.
That's my definition, and I know what that looks like. It means I'm not trying to be what somebody else wants me to be, because there's times that I am. I got to be politician. There's times you're going to be leader. There's something. But are you really being who you're supposed to be? At the end of the day, that's what I define success of, is like, was I the most authentic David that I could be, and not try to impress or over impress, just be me. If people like it, so be it. If they don't, so be it. But by golly, I'm going to be myself, and that's a good day. That's a healthy day. But I think success again too is just loving yourself well. I mean, that sounds so selfish, but sometimes we beat ourselves up so badly as people. We got to stop and say, you know what? I love what you're saying there. That's a tool I'm going to implement myself, because I think like you. I look down, I'm like, man, what did I really get done today? And there's a lot of great things that happen. I think even like sitting down and doing a podcast, and the impact it has on people to hear truth. See, because a lot of times if we don't share our truth of our struggle, everybody loves like you said, everybody loves the wins. But when we share, we're human. That we stress at night. We have dark days. I know what depression looks like. I know what anxiety looks like. I know what despair looks like.
No
I
doubt.
just don't. We don't show it. I mean, there's no ribbon cutting for that. There ain't no parade, for that. But to write down what 3 things I did well, to better, and to learn. That's good coaching there. I mean, that's a good takeaway for me. But I think it's just being able to sit down and be truthful with yourself. And if you're doing that, you're going to live a good life, a happy life. If you're not being truthful with yourself or others, I think you're struggling. And
Yeah.
ask for help. We all go through it.
Amen. And I do think that that's one of the reasons why I can relate to some people, I think, pretty well, is go back to the authentic and the vulnerable. Like, I do not have any issues sharing the crap in my life, the issues that I've had, the things that, have bogged me down, the fights that I, fight. I don't have no issue sharing that, and a lot of people do, I mean, what do you see on Instagram and Twitter and
Yeah.
Facebook? You see the smiles and the selfies on top of the mountain. You don't see the valley time. And I don't mind sharing that, because what I do know is that every human listening to this is
Yeah.
either in the valley, they've been in the valley, or they're headed to the valley, and that's a fact of life. You know what I mean? And I want to help people be able to manage the valley, as very, very best that they can. Have you ever found, and I know we're getting to the end of time. I could sit here and talk all day, because I love getting better, right? Hence the podcast name, right? But I also love talking about leadership. But I know I've utilized every single bit of your time, plus a little bit. Have you ever found in your life that you have chased the wrong thing as success? You know, have you ever recognized the fact that I'm chasing the wrong thing?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you drink the Kool-Aid sometimes when like when I got here, I can say there was a season when you're chasing the image or the persona that you're kind of liking that's being created that you never really needed to live with before. And now you kind of created this other person that you got an identity crisis going on. Am I going to be this bold one thing, or I'm just going to be David? And so, yeah, there's times you can chase a persona because it really is another image, and you kind of like that one. But
Yeah.
yeah, I found times whenever I'm chasing a desire that's more about what I look like than versus what the fundamentals were about processes, relationships, and trust. Sometimes you can start reading your own press clippings and get a little bit of, I'm pretty good at what I'm doing. And those days, the best humble pie you can get is from yourself. You'd rather get it from you than getting it another way. But there's times that, yeah,
Yeah.
I pursued an image or a persona based upon what others have built for me, and that's not their fault. That's my own. I kind of liked it, leaned into it, and got away from what was working. Yeah,
Well, they say our ears never stop growing. So they say sometimes our egos never stop growing too. Like it is, that's a real factor that, we have to keep in check because it is easy. It is easy sometimes to think more of yourself. Then every once in a while, you're going to get humbled, which is good, but I think one of the first things we as humans, I think growing older, you get a little wisdom the older you get. And that's, you know, assuring that you are attaching success to the right thing. You know what I'm saying? Like it's not
yeah,
about, titles and positions and things like that, but it being more about fulfillment, helping other people, servant leadership, I think is probably one of the first things we all have to do is make sure that success has a definition that we're going to be happy with 25 or 30 years from now, when a lot of them things we was chasing is gone, you know what I'm saying? And things have gotten tough on us, right?
yeah.
Give me Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say it's like to that back to your definition of success. I think that if I was going to have something in my legacy or something was going to be read at my funeral, what would be said of me? What I would want said of me, I would want it to say that's a guy that was so authentic that he shared his struggle that it helped me to be where I'm at today.
Hmm.
He saw value in me and helped me become the best I could be through his own struggle. That he was so vulnerable to the point that he didn't care if it cost him everything to do it, versus that he was somebody that had an image that he really wasn't. I want to leave this world better for my kids, my grandkids. It's like, you know what? It's not how you start, but how you finish. And it is a bumpy road, and you will go through valleys. And it's okay to go through valleys.
Hmm.
And I want people to know it's okay not to be okay, and you're going to have struggle. And looking at our success, I don't want people to see me as a successful individual. I want them to see somebody that fought through adversity and still came out and says, you know what, I still love who I am, and I still love you. Care about my neighbor and care about my family.
I love that. That would be absolutely awesome if that was, what they said about me as well. I'd be really happy. Real
Yeah.
quick, give me a book. Give me a book that's made a difference.
A book called The Trust Edge by David Horsager is a good one. And then I'm always going to tell everybody, if I'm encouraging anybody, the best book you can read is obviously the Word of God, but start with Proverbs every day. I do a proverb for the date of the month. It's like there's so much wisdom inside of that. If you want to know how to stay out of trouble, read a proverb a day. It's good. But Trust Edge, you cannot go wrong reading that book. Anybody that's heard me speak, they're going to hear that book.
That's
I'll
awesome.
send you. I'll
I have
send you a
not
copy.
I have not read that book, which is absolutely amazing because I have read a ton of them. And I actually have a book for you too. So we'll swap books.
Yeah,
I got
I'll
one
send you.
uh, that I just bought. I actually bought several copies of it because I really like it and I like the author. So I will get that to you. What are you listening to? If you got headphones on, are you music? Are you podcast? Are you book? What's going
Oh,
on?
so both. There's two things I'm always listening to. I'm either going to listen to I'm always going to listen to some sort of worship song that's just telling me that about fighting and overcoming. I mean, I'm not just all. I mean, there's all sorts of country music and stuff, but I'm always going to gym. And if you're with DB on the golf course, you're hearing everything.
For
And
sure.
so I've got a little bit of playlist on all of them. I like to kind of get it loud and get going and get myself motivated in the day. Podcast, I'm always listening to stuff that's self-awareness. So anything on complex attachment trauma, things that what I've learned through counseling that makes me more self-aware of my behavior, of how I'm going to evolve. Naturally, Rick Warren's a good listen to him. God, well, the last one I listened to, God's promises are bigger than my problems. And so stuff like that. That's what I'm gonna listen to.
Fantastic. Give me one piece of advice that the 50-year-old, I don't know how old you are, I'm just guessing, David Cameron would tell the 25-year-old David Cameron.
Slow down. Slow down. It will be there tomorrow. I would tell it, slow down and just breathe a little and give yourself some space. Sometimes I got going so fast that I never really enjoyed the ride, and you never got to enjoy the success because you're constantly worried about the next victory. I would tell them it's like now I make myself slow down. I'd say it'll still be there for you. You're not losing ground. You're actually losing ground the faster you try to go.
Man, fantastic. If there's somebody listening that wants to connect with you, how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, I'll just give them. You can go to find me on LinkedIn or my LinkedIn page. I'm always going to take a request, and then I always have no problem giving my cell phone number out, which is 417-838-5342. And what I'd say, if you're ever struggling, you don't know me, no one knows me in that capacity. If they're struggling mentally or struggling just with having a rough day, I'm always listening here, and I'll always answer my call. If you're going to call to complain, you get blocked.
Hey, David, man, I really appreciate you taking the time, making the time. It's been an honor. It's been a privilege. I've heard a lot about you. The interview lived up to, what was said about you. So I'm very thankful that you've taken the time to come on today.
Yeah, thank you. I enjoyed it myself.
Yes, sir. Well, I appreciate all of you that listen. I hope you'll share this one with somebody, and let's push leadership amongst our communities. Until next time, adios, amigos.